This session is on outcome-based education, OBE, better known as OBE. I'm sure you've got it here in Ohio. We've got it all over the country. In case you're not familiar with what OBE is, or outcome-based education, first let me say that they no longer call it that. Because in the last few years, outcome-based education has gotten such a bad reputation because of what Christians have done in exposing it to the public that they no longer use that terminology. They don't even use the word outcomes anymore. The word, they will describe, outcome-based education is now known as human resources development system. And what were once outcomes are now benchmarks. Now, the reason why they changed the vocabulary is to confuse us. You know, they say, oh, we don't have OBE any longer. You know, we're not doing that. So they figured that the natives will cool down. But it's very much being implemented throughout the United States. I don't know what the exact situation is here in Ohio, but I know that in my own state of Massachusetts, they got it in without even using that terminology at all. As a matter of fact, most of the parents hadn't the faintest idea what this school reform was all about. But it's also referred to as school to work, careers, etc. As a matter of fact, there are two bills presently in Congress that are in committee, H.R. 1617 and S-143. Those two bills will implement and fund this program, this human resources development program, which is really changing American education from what was once a decent academic, traditionally academic system into really just a kind of vocational system. In fact, what they're doing is, you see, they're preparing the population for the New World Order. You have to understand that the public schools today are being changed so that they can prepare the children for global citizenship, for the New World Order, and that New World Order will have a very weak resemblance to what we consider to be America, our system of government. They'd love to change the Constitution if they could do that, but they think that they can change, that they really can change this country through the education system. You have to understand that the people who are behind all of this are pure, unadulterated socialists. They've been working on this for years. They've been working on this since the turn of the century, when John Dewey and the progressives decided to change America from a individualistic, capitalistic, believing nation into a socialist, atheist, and a collectivist society. They've been working on it all these years. And finally, they realized they'd have to do it through the education system, because Americans were not about to give up free enterprise or not about to give up individualism or their religion. And so they decided that they would have to work through the schools. They would have to educate the children in such a manner that the children themselves would change America, that they would vote for those politicians who would then bring about this New World Order and this new socialist America. And if you want to know what their model of socialism was, you can find it in a book entitled Looking Backward by Edward Bellamy, published in 1888. And in that book, Bellamy projected a fantasy of a socialist America in the year 2000. And what you see in that particular book is a totally egalitarian society. And that's what these socialist educators have wanted. That's what they're working at, and that's what they're going to give us, if we let them. We're putting up a bit of resistance. Certainly the homeschool movement is the best thing that's ever happened to this country, because parents are taking matters into their own hands, and they're doing the only thing they can do, and that is to exercise their still existing freedom to take their children back and to educate them as they see fit, rather than as the state sees fit. So it's very important what you're doing. It's very important what the homeschool movement is, and I'm delighted to see so many new people entering the movement, particularly this year. As a matter of fact, I spoke to a homeschooling convention down in Florida last weekend, and one of the gentlemen there who gave a kind of history of the homeschool movement, said that back in the early days, incidentally, when I spoke to the first convention that was held here in Ohio, those people were pioneers. Then after that, you got the settlers. And now what we're getting are the refugees. The ones who were streaming out of the public schools realize that, hey, they'd better get out while the getting is good. Well, they still can, you see. That's the most important thing. You still have enough freedom to get out of this system that's trying to destroy everything that we hold dear. And that's why it's so important to know what outcome-based education is all about. Well, I'll give you just a bit of a comparison. In traditional education, the government felt an obligation, you might say the citizens, through their government, felt an obligation to make sure that everybody in this country got a good start with a decent education. We were taught the 3 R's, particularly when I was going to school, which is quite some time ago. I was in first grade in 1931, so I know what it was like back in the days when the schools actually did a decent job. They actually taught us reading, writing, and arithmetic, and then they taught us some basic knowledge that we had to have, basic history, geography, etc. I was even taught touch typing in junior high school. My sister was taught shorthand in high school. We had shop. It wasn't as if we were being denied all aspects of using our hands or gaining skills that enabled us to make our way in the workplace. So we were doing that very nicely. The most important thing, though, was that you had the freedom to decide what you wanted to learn and how much of it you wanted to learn. Yeah, they taught American history, but it was up to you as to how well you wanted to do in the subject. As long as you got a passing grade, for some people that was enough. Others wanted to get an A, they worked hard at it. But as soon as you finished, you went through your 12 years, they said, okay, go out into the world, make your way. And that was it. And that was good enough. And the only thing that they wanted to know about me, particularly when I registered in the school, was my name, my address, my date of birth, my parents' names and their address, and that's about it. And that was American education back in the days when they knew how to educate. Now, this new system is totally different. First of all, it's going to take control of you from birth because they believe, you see, first of all, the whole system has been devised by psychologists, behavioral psychologists. That you've got to understand, that behavioral psychologists are in back of this. That's why the early part of the century is so important in understanding how all of this came about. And if you read my book, NEA, Trojan Horse in American Education, it explains how the progressive movement got started. That what took place was a marriage between education and psychology. And psychology now dominates education. The behavioral psychologists use mastery learning techniques. What is mastery learning? It's animal training. That's all it is. Mastery learning is a form of animal training. And because they believe that your children are animals, they will be trained like animals. That's what evolution is all about. And that's why they hammer away on evolution from day one. The minute kids enter the first grade, they find ways of teaching those kids that they are little animals. Because the educators intend to teach them as if they were animals, to train them. Training is replacing learning. Training is replacing intellectual development, you see. So, first of all, you have to understand that they want to gain control of you and your children as early as possible. Now, when I was down in North Carolina, I was introduced to an outcome-based education project that was going to be implemented in the schools of Gaston County. And they put out a very interesting document in which they described everything they were going to do. And this particular project was called the Odyssey Project. You see, they always like these fancy names, as if they were doing something that was, had the mark of genius, Odyssey. Oh, doesn't that sound wonderful? So they call this the Odyssey Project, and it says, the Odyssey Project describes a formal system of basic schooling for students ages 3 to 18, with a developmental prenatal to age 3 component. Prenatal to age 3. In other words, they're going to take control of pregnancies. The minute they find out that somebody is pregnant, the pregnancy police will be out there, to make sure that you have a good pregnancy, I suppose. That would be the purpose of it, because you see, the psychologists are convinced that all of these learning disabilities, all of this ADD that we have is caused by women who do terrible things during pregnancy. Some of them eat pickles, and some of them smoke cigarettes, and some of them have a glass of beer, and of course they assume that that's the cause of all of these problems, so they're going to monitor pregnancies. That's what this prenatal component, prenatal to age 3. The project will use an outcome-based education model that focuses on the knowledge, skill, and attitudes that students should possess when they graduate from Odyssey Learning Centers. And so there you start with this idea that you're going to be monitored, that they're going to deal with your attitudes. You see, attitudes is very important. They're going to shape your thinking. In fact, the godfather of outcome-based education is a professor by the name of Benjamin Bloom, who taught at the University of Chicago in the graduate school there. And he was very concerned about, he was a behavioral psychologist, and all of this was, this whole project started in the 1950s. You have to understand that what they're implementing today is not something they dreamed up yesterday. These are things that they have been working on for years and years in the labs, in the universities, and as long as these plans were being worked on in the labs and in the universities, nobody cared what these foolish professors were doing. In their ivory towers, who cared? But now they want to implement all of this stuff. Well, they put down in the book exactly what they wanted, and they called that book the Taxonomy of Educational Objectives. The Taxonomy of Educational Objectives. These were humanist professors who decided what education should be. First of all, they wanted to be totally humanistic. Get every last vestige of Christianity out of American education. That was very important for them. And Bloom writes in his book, this taxonomy is designed to be a classification of the student behaviors which represent the intended outcomes of the educational process. What we are classifying is the intended behavior of students, the ways in which individuals are to act, think, or feel as a result of participating in some unit of instruction. By educational objectives, we mean explicit formulations of the ways in which students are expected to be changed by the educative process. That is, the ways in which they will change in their thinking, their feelings, and their actions. So there's much more involved here, and they were the ones who put this tremendous emphasis on the so-called affective domain. That is, you see, in the last 20 years, American education has been divided into two parts. They have what they call the cognitive domain and the affective domain. The cognitive domain is supposed to be concerned with, reading, writing, and arithmetic, and that sort of thing. And the affective domain deals with feelings, beliefs, values, sexuality, all of that other good stuff, you see, that the educators are, love to be involved with, so that they're not only trying to teach your children or train your children, but they want to change their feelings, change their values. It's very important. Change their attitudes. Now, Dr. Bloom realized, and he and the other behaviorists realized, that the earlier you get the kids, the better you can influence their their basic mentality, their values, and all of that. And he wrote, quote, "The evidence points out convincingly to the fact that age is a factor operating against attempts to effect a complete or thoroughgoing reorganization of attitudes and values." You hear that? They're concerned with a thoroughgoing reorganization of attitudes and values. Now, when I went to school back in 1931, the last thing my teacher was interested in was in reorganizing my attitudes or values. My teacher simply wanted to add to what I brought to school. I mean, I came out of a traditional Jewish family, an immigrant family. She wasn't interested in reorganizing my beliefs or anything like that. And and we loved our teachers because they added something to our lives. They gave us what we couldn't get from home, but they did not take anything away, you see. She wasn't interested in our attitudes or our values and our feelings. The last thing she would have wanted to know was how I felt. You know, she just wanted to know whether or not I was learning something. But today they're very concerned about, how do you feel? How do you feel about 2 and 2 being 4? Do you feel does that make you feel good, or you don't like it? Well, you can change that, you know. Bloom goes on, he says, "The evidence collected thus far suggests that a single hour of classroom activity under certain conditions may bring about a major reorganization in cognitive as well as affective behaviors. We are of the opinion that this will prove to be a most fruitful area of research in connection with the affective domain." Now, this was written in the 50s. Now they're implementing it, you see. Now, he's saying that all they need is a single hour, and they can do that to your child. They can take your child and in a single hour of classroom activity bring about a major reorganization in cognitive as well as affective behaviors. That's why so many Christian parents who put their kids in public schools suffer these tragedies of their children getting on drugs, daughters getting pregnant, all sorts of things that go on. And, of course, they don't know what hit them. They don't know why. They ask them, what did we do wrong? Well, the first thing they did wrong was to put their kids in the hands of behavioral psychologists, a bunch of atheists who believe in humanism and evolution, and treat their kids like animals. You know, what do you expect with that kind of behavior? But it's interesting, if you learn nothing else from this lecture, then the fact that the psychoeducators know how to cause a major reorganization of values in the mind of a child in a single classroom hour, then you've learned why it is so dangerous to put a child in the public school. I know of an 8-year-old second grader in Michigan who hanged himself because of a film on suicide he was shown in the classroom. Imagine second graders being shown a film on suicide, and this kid then the next day experimenting or playing. God knows what he was doing. He was not suicidal. According to his parents, they told me Stephen was not at all suicidal. Hanged himself. Now, of course, the parents were very upset. They went. The mother asked the kids in Stephen's class, "Why do you think Stephen did this?" And they said, "Oh, we saw this film." Film? This film about suicide. Film about suicide? What film? You see, the parents hadn't been informed. The parents weren't asked whether or not they wanted their second graders to see a film on suicide. And so if little Stephen hadn't seen that film, he would be alive today. Now, what did the parents do? They sued the school, they sued the principal, everybody in sight, the teachers, the second grade teachers who had arranged this. They sued the Encyclopedia Britannica, which was the distributor of the film. And you know what the courts ruled finally after an appeal and all that money spent on trying to get some sort of justice? The courts decided that this was a case of educational malpractice, and that the courts did not want to get involved in that area because if they began litigating on educational malpractice, they would be swamped with cases. And so these parents have gotten no justice, and the teachers and the school have gotten off scot-free. The interesting thing about the teachers was that the parents wanted to find out why the teachers decided to show this film to second graders when the catalog said that this film was for fourth graders and up. Why did they want to show it to second graders? Well, I suspect that they were doing it because they were living up to Bloom's contention that the earlier you do these things to the kids, the better chance you have of reorganizing their minds. So, well, poor little Stephen was really reorganized. But the lawyers of the parents wanted to look at the teachers' lesson plans. Do you know what the teachers did with their lesson plans? They destroyed them. They weren't available. Can you imagine a teacher destroying the previous year's entire lesson plans? It's not a natural thing to do. A teacher wants to refer to what happened previously so that she can either improve her plans or simply follow up on them. And this was a clear case of obstruction of justice by destruction of evidence, and yet they got away with it. See, I call this the hit-and-run technique. The schools do their dirty work, cause the problems, parents complain, but they manage to get, they manage to survive very well. I've seen this particular technique used in Massachusetts where the high schoolers were forced to watch a pornographic presentation by a lady by the name of Susie Landolfi, who, talks about safe sex and condoms and all of that. And she puts on a truly pornographic production. Parents were not warned. They weren't told whether or not their children should attend. As a matter of fact, they wouldn't have known anything about it, but somebody made a video of the particular performance. Suddenly they could see how lascivious all of this was, and so they were able to, they tried to sue, and again, the same result. The courts gave cleared Susie Landolfi, and the parents got nowhere. This is going on all the time in public education today. As a matter of fact, the latest fracas that I've come across is really remarkable. Part of outcome-based education, every child is going to get, or the human resources development system, every child gets a individual health plan. You see, socialized medicine is going to be brought into the United States through the back door, through the education system. You see, Hillary tried to get it in through the front door, and the American people slammed it in her face. They said, we don't want socialized medicine. Well, these educators are very clever. They say, American is going to get socialized medicine whether they want it or not. We're going to give it to them, and they're going to do it through the education system. And so now, every child is going to have to undergo a thorough, comprehensive physical. Now, the Pennsylvania Department of Health has mandated that every little girl, every sixth grade girl, must undergo an examination of her genitalia. And this took place in Pennsylvania recently, again, not only without the parents' knowledge or permission, but here were these little girls of 11 years old were herded into a room, forced to strip, get on a table, spread their legs, and have some doctor, poke where he should not have been permitted to. And the parents were just absolutely furious. And this got into the local newspapers, and the school system is defending its its actions, even though the girls screamed. They wanted to call home. One girl wanted to jump out of the window. And yet the school authorities went ahead with this examination. Again, another hit-and-run technique. This is going on all the time. You won't know when they're going to subject your child to that 1 hour that may destroy that child for good. You won't know. The educators have developed the techniques. They know how to do it, and they are doing it. So that's how outcome-based education works, and the only solution you have, the only way that you can get out of it, the only way that you can guarantee that your child will not be subjected to this kind of activity is to get your child out of the public school. There's no other way to do it. And that's why I welcome all of the new people into the homeschool movement, because I think many of you have come to realize that there's something terribly wrong with what's going on in today's schools. Now, your child may not have experienced some of these horrible situations, but more and more children are experiencing it. Well, we also get a very good view of what all of this is about from a letter that was written by a man by the name of Mark Tucker to Hillary Clinton. Now, who is Mark Tucker? Mark Tucker actually is the architect of this whole new human resources development system. Incidentally, just the word human resources means that your children are a resource. You see, like coal, iron, that's a resource. And they're going to develop that resource. For whose good? For the child's good? No. The child is now going to be trained to serve the economy, serve the state. You see, back in the old days, it was the economy that was supposed to serve the citizens. And it was the state that was supposed to serve us. Now it's the other way around. Everybody now is going to serve the state and serve the economy. And that's why the business people are behind this also. Big business has gotten involved with government, with big government. You have big business, big government, big education to take the American people and train them in the way that they want them to be trained. And don't you think that they're going to train them so that they can read or write well, because they're using whole language and all of these debilitating methods of teaching in outcome-based education. In fact, whole language is an integral part of the outcome-based or human resources development system. And I'll tell you why. Because what they are aiming for in this socialist, fascist system is a pyramidal society where you have an elite at the top. You know, people like Hillary and Billary. Those are the leaders. That's the elite, you see. Hillary and her friends. Those are the people. They come out of the Ivy League universities. You see, they go to Yale, Harvard. These people are being groomed to rule over us, you see. This is the elite that is being created by these universities to rule over Americans. You see, we're all so dumb that we need these people to, and as you know, Hillary Clinton is the most brilliant woman that ever walked the face of the earth. So that's the kind of people who will be ruling over us. So they are at the top of the pyramid, and they have a special certificate for them. They will cull out of the population those people who will be groomed for the top, the elite. And then the second tier, right under the elite, will be the professionals, the artists, the anchor persons, all of those people who are the privileged ones above there, who are running America, you know, who are distorting the news for our benefit, producing propaganda instead of facts for us. They are the second tier, and below them will be everybody else, the plebes, the peons, the workers, who will be trained to do the bidding of the elite and the professionals. So you have the three certificates, and that's how the system will now be operated. Forget about everybody getting the same diploma and going on to higher education. They are changing America, and they're not going to stop until they can do it. And the only thing that's going to stop it is opposition from us and the lack of children. If they don't have the kids to train, it's going to be awfully hard for them to, produce what they want in empty classrooms, you see. But that's what we're dealing with. In any case, something wonderful happened about a year ago. A letter, you see, this man, Mark Tucker, who came up through the ranks of nonprofit organizations, public radio, educational labs, Carnegie Corporation. He's got this mind where he has conceived of this human resources development system. And he was one who worked with the governors at the famous conference in Charlottesville back in 1988, gave them their goals, which have become Goals 2000. And you remember President Bush with his, speech about these goals. Where did President Bush get these ideas from? Did he get them from conservatives? No, he got them from a bunch of socialists out of the Carnegie Corporation. And why are Republicans backing a socialist plan coming out of these foundations? I haven't been able to find an answer to that problem or to that question. In any case, Mark Tucker created something called the National Center on Education and the Economy. This is the think tank that has dreamed up this whole plan for America. He's taken Bloom's plan and he's refined it, you see. And so Hillary Clinton was one of his, member of his board of trustees. And she was working with him on this plan before Bill became president. Because at that Charlottesville conference, Bill Clinton was one of the leading figures in that conference in creating this new human resources system. And so on that board of trustees, you had James Hunt, John Scully of the Apple Computer, Mario Cuomo. You had Hillary Clinton, Lewis Harris of the Harris Poll, David Rockefeller Jr. Very interesting person to be involved in something like this. Well, anyway, when Bill was elected, I mean, this whole crowd was just delirious with joy. And so Mark wrote a letter to Hillary, an 18-page letter in which he outlined this entire plan because he wanted to make sure that Bill got it firsthand. And he sent this letter to Hillary. And this letter has fallen into our hands, an 18-page letter. I don't know how. Nobody knows who got the first copy, but we have it. And this is what he wrote her. This was November 11th, 1992, just after the election. He says, "Dear Hillary, I still can't believe you won, but utter delight that you did pervades all the circles in which I move. I met last Wednesday in David Rockefeller's office with him, John Scully, Dave Barham, and David Hazelcorn. It was a great celebration. Both John and David R. were more expansive than I have ever seen them, literally radiating happiness." So there you are. This was their big opportunity. And so he said that then they had, he said the subject we were discussing was what you and Bill should do now about education, training, and labor market policy. Following that meeting, I chaired another in Washington on the same topic. Though these, he says, our purpose in these meetings was to propose concrete actions that the Clinton administration could take between now and the inauguration in the first 100 days and beyond. The result from where I sit was really exciting. We took a very large leap forward in terms of how to advance the agenda on which you and we have all been working. A practical plan for putting all the major components of the system in place within 4 years by the time Bill has to run again. And you know that all of those components are now in place? some of the laws were already passed during the previous Democratic Congress. The Goals 2000 and School to Work. That's already passed. Money is there. It's going to the states. But the Republicans decided to do it a little differently. And so they have proposed a plan that would consolidate some of these things into a new bill, and that's H.R. 1617 and S-143. The H.R., of course, House of Representatives. Now, these two bills will implement Mark Tucker's plan. Why is a Republican Congress trying to implement this plan? Now, let me tell you what this plan is like. He describes it in a few choice sentences. He says, and this is just one sentence out of an 18-page letter. He says, what is essential is that we create a seamless web of opportunities to develop one's skills that literally extends from cradle to grave and is the same system for everyone, young and old, poor and rich, worker and full-time student, you see. So this is the egalitarian plan that, that was written about in 1888. Of course, it's undergone changes, but this is basically an egalitarian plan. Everybody's included, from cradle to the grave, including medical. We know that they're going to have a big medical component because they've already, the plan is on the computer. I mean, the tracking of every single individual that enters the school system, beginning day one, beginning at birth. They will have you on this master computer in Washington that will have far more information about you than any FBI file. And they'll begin assembling this file on you before you're even born. This is the master computer system that is going to be used to track everybody and control everybody. You see how they've got everything under control? And this computer, this master computer, which is going to get all this data that's going to be gathered by all of the states and then modemmed to Washington, all of this has been in the works since the 1970s. None of this stuff that's now being implemented was dreamed up just yesterday. It's been in the works for 20, 30 years. And now people are suddenly finding out what their educators and bureaucrats have been planning for them. They're planning to create a totalitarian society in which they will be able to control everybody through this computer, through the information that they will have about every single individual. And incidentally, I have some copies of the Hillary letter, if any of you would like some copies. And I got the two data handbooks. Student Data Handbook for Early Childhood, Elementary, and Secondary Education. This is the plan for putting everything on the computer. They're going to want to know every possible thing about you. They've got categories that begin with 1 and go to hundreds of different categories. Health history. They've got a list of diseases you wouldn't believe. They're also very concerned about your teeth. They want to know a lot about you. For the life of me, I couldn't figure out why they want to know so much about your teeth. Yeah, well, yeah, that's true. Let me give, for example, here are their categories for teeth with the oral health. It's the category of oral health. It says, and they have I won't read the code designations. These are just the numbers to which each one of these things has a number, you see, because that's how it gets into the computer. Number of teeth, number of permanent teeth lost, number of teeth decayed, number of teeth restored, occlusion condition with subcategories: normal occlusion, mild malocclusion, moderate malocclusion, severe malocclusion, gingival condition, with subcategories: normal, mild deviation, moderate deviation, severe deviation, oral soft tissue condition, with subcategories: normal, mild deviation, moderate deviation, severe deviation, dental prosthetics, and orthodontic appliances. Boy, that's much more than I even know about my own teeth. How many of you could answer these questions? Well, you see, if they're already examining the genitalia of 11-year-old girls, they're also going to get a good look into your mouth. You see, the government wants to get into your mouth. Why? It's a question that I ask. Why does the government want to know all this about? When I went to school, all they want to know was my name and my address and my date of birth. Now they want to know all about my malocclusions. God knows what that is. I don't even know what these terms stand for. You know, all I know is about a filling, you know, a filling, a tooth pulled. I mean, you know, simple stuff. Well, I've come to the conclusion that since this is a new method of controlling the American people, that they want control, and identity is very important. They have to identify. There's so many areas in which they identify you here. Not only by Social Security numbers, they've got numbers all over the place for every single individual. But they also must have physical means to make sure that you are the person that they are after or don't like. Because you remember when Waco burned up, and how did they identify David Koresh? How did they know that he was dead, that they had gotten him, that he hadn't escaped somewhere? Teeth. That's why they want to know all about your teeth, you see. And they want to have it on a central computer in Washington, so it'll be easy to get, because apparently that they're going to be doing this sort of thing to a lot of people. Now, how do we know that? Well, I'll tell you. Some people think I'm paranoid. But would you say that that the Jews were paranoid in Germany in 1933? Would you say that the Russian people were paranoid in 1917? I mean, a little paranoia helps these days. It puts you on guard, because I get strange things in the mail. For example, I subscribe to a humanist magazine because I want to find out what they're thinking and doing. And naturally, they send out these names. They sell their mailing list to others. So I'm on, I'm on the ACLU list. I'm on the Democratic Party list. They keep sending me, membership cards for the Democratic Party. I'm on the, you name it. But there are two that are very interesting. One is called, population growth. What is it? There are two. One is, well, the one that I'm concerned about is called negative population growth. There's one that's just plain population growth, and all they want to do is stabilize the present population. But negative population growth believes that America should be reduced to 150 million people. So we've got to get rid of 100 million people. I mean, you think these people are kooks? You ought to see the names on the letterhead. These are not stupid people. If you want to get rid of 100 million people, you got to think about it. I mean, supposing I pose that plan to you. We got to get rid of 100 million people pretty soon. How would you do it? Somebody's planning something. I mean, they say, oh, don't have too many children, that sort of thing. You got some crazy people out there, these environmentalists, who are more concerned with, hugging trees than hugging kids. And to give you the sense of hypocrisy in these people, they talk about human beings as now children being human resources. Well, if human beings are human resources, why are they destroying over 1 million of them every year? I mean, just, if you were mining for gold, would you destroy, 1/3 of your output? or coal or any product, if it's a resource, a so-called scarce resource, no, these people are, they're for abortion at the same time where human resources to be developed and enslaved in the manner that they see fit, you see. You've got to realize that the kooks are running the asylum. That's what's happened. They've taken over, and we've let it happen because it's not that we were asleep at the switch. It's just that everything they write is very boring, you see. So only people like me read it. Because, you know, I make my books about it. So I get that, I go through all of this boring stuff so that to spare you the agony. But I've brought it all in this new book, The Whole Language OBE Frauds. But if you want to find out what's really going on in American education today, you want to see how you are being taken to the cleaners, how America is being taken to the cleaners, and you are paying for every bit of it. Get hold of this book. And if you want to know about the earlier part, the NE8 Trojan Horse in American Education, in which I discuss the beginnings of this whole plan, this plan to socialize America, to create a socialist society, and of the marriage between the educators and the psychologists. That's very important to understand why the system cannot be reformed, why they will never go back to basics. Never, never, never. You have to understand that you're dealing with a bunch of fascist totalitarians who will stop at nothing to get what they want. And the only reason why they haven't gone further is because they're afraid of waking up too many people. But they can't hide it completely. And so a lot of you people are now waking up and finding out that this system is a fraud, that they're not teaching your children, that their intention is to dumb down your kids so they'll become the little peons to be used by the elite. Because that's how a communist society, a socialist society operates, from the top down. You have the elite at the top who rules over everybody else, and we've got a bunch of, snobs up at the top there, these arrogant individuals who think that they can get away with murder. Yeah, they really think they can get away with it. So far they have. But let's hope that they don't. Let's hope that they don't. Thank you very much for your attention. God bless you. And bye.